Anastasia, and I work at the Mono Arts Council. Today, we will be learning about the artist Paul Klee, and we will learn about what abstract art is before we create our own abstract paintings. Let's go over the supplies before we get into a slideshow where we'll learn more about Paul Klee, his artwork, and what abstract art is. First, you will need a black crayon, and you'll also need some tempera paint that is yellow, red, blue, and white. Yellow, red, blue, and white tempera paint. You will also need a sheet of construction paper. I will be using this light blue construction paper. We will be using this landscape and not portrait. So we'll be using this landscape, light blue construction paper. Go ahead, set that right in front of you. We'll also need a paintbrush and a container with water. I'm using a jar. You could use a cup or a bowl, but you will need a paintbrush and some water. We will be using lots of water today. Also make sure that you have something to mix colors on. I'll be using this paper plate, but you can use paper towels. I prefer 2 together or 2 sheets of paper together. Sometimes I use a plate from my kitchen. The paint is water-based, so it will clean very easily, but make sure you have something to mix colors on, okay? So a plate or a bowl, something to mix colors on. I will go over the supplies at the end of the slideshow one more time, but first, let's take a look at what we'll be creating today. We will create paintings of abstract fish. And I'll give you opportunities to make this painting your own, but we will paint abstract fish. And you might notice there's some colors on here that I did not mention that we will be using. And that is because we will mix some of these primary colors to make new colors like purple and orange. So without further ado, let's get to know the artist Paul Klee by looking at a slideshow of Paul Klee's artwork and get to know what abstract art is before we create our own paintings of abstract art. Paul first learned to play the violin at a young age. Both of his parents were musicians. His father taught music lessons and his mother was a singer, and Paul played the violin. Now, his favorite composer was Mozart, and we'll hear a little bit of some violin in Mozart's composition now. So that was a composition from Paul Klee's favorite composer, Mozart. You might recognize that music. That is classical music. Paul Klee also liked the composer Beethoven. So this is some of Paul Klee's math homework. I'm sure we've all doodled on our homework before. He drew a man in the top right corner. There's some music notes in the middle, and then underneath of the music notes is a sketch of the composer Beethoven. Let's listen to what those music notes sound like and hear some of Beethoven's composition symphony. So that was some Beethoven there. And those music notes that you see on Paul Klee's homework, that is what we are hearing in that composition, that dun 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 dun, dun 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 dun. And you've probably heard that before. That is probably one of the compositions or the music notes that Beethoven is most famous for. But what made Paul fall in love with art was his grandmother. She would draw pictures of the stories that she was telling him as a young boy. And so when Paul grew up, he chose to become an artist. This is Paul Klee in his art studio. Paul's family is originally from Germany, but Paul was born and raised in Switzerland, and that is also where he spent most of his life. Paul was known to spend all day, every day, creating in his art studio. But music was always an important part of Paul Klee's life. Every morning, he would start his day by playing the violin. That is how he would warm up to creating and get inspiration for his paintings. So this is Paul Klee in his art studio. And Paul felt like he could see the music with his eyes. He felt like he could see what the music notes looked like, and he would use what he saw while he was playing music combined with his imagination to create his artwork. This is called Senecio, Head of Man, and Paul loved circus clowns. So this is supposed to be a painting of a circus clown. And I know it does not look like what you would think of when you think of a circus clown. And that is exactly what abstract art is. The art doesn't always look exactly like a picture of the intended object. But you might recognize maybe the white face paint, the rosy cheeks. Paul also liked to add fun shapes and lines in his artwork. And he would also combine warm and cool colors to help you move your eyes around the painting. Warm colors are colors such as red, yellow, pink, orange. Cool colors would be green and blue. Paul also married a musician, and her name was Lily. Lily played the piano, and they had a son named Felix. This is a portrait of Felix. As you can tell it's a baby, right? It does have some different lines and shapes in this painting, but it doesn't look like a picture of a baby. Paul also used values or shades of different colors in his artwork. And so when we are creating our paintings today, keep that in mind. We're going to use lots of water so that we get all of the shades or values of each color. That's exactly what Paul did in this painting. He used lots of water to get the shades between black and white, those gray tones that we see. And this is called Around the Fish. One of Paul's favorite hobbies was to go fishing. He would actually cook most of his family dinners. And so this was one of his favorite dishes to make. Now, this is called Around the Fish because Paul wants us to look at all of the objects around the plate. So he purposely paints the plate blue so that our eyes go first to the yellow and red objects around the plate. He also adds in an exclamation mark and an arrow at the top of the plate that's in red and yellow to let you know, hey, look here first. Look around the plate at the different yellow and red objects or the warm colored objects, and then we hone in on what's on the blue plate, that pink fish. And this is called landscape with yellow birds. What do your eyes go to first? Those yellow birds. He has the birds looking in different directions to also help guide your eyes around the painting. And I love all of the different birds that are peeking out, especially the one in the top in the middle there that's kind of between the two areas. There's one in the middle at the bottom, his little tail sticking out. I just love the yellow birds and all the different directions they're looking. Lots of fun, weird, funky looking plants and trees. You can really tell that Paul Klee used his imagination to create this painting. This is called Tree of Houses. I mean, what a fun tree house this is. Lots of different levels, different shaped houses. There's some trees growing out of houses. Just a fun picture here. Paul, once again, uses warm and cool colors together. He uses red, the warm color, blue, the cool color, to help guide your eyes around the painting. He also has a ladder going up the tree so that your eyes move up the tree house, and then he has a bird pointing straight down so that your eyes move around the painting. Paul also uses lots of texture in this painting especially. What Paul did was he painted directly on a piece of fabric. This happens to be burlap, which is what potato sack bags are made from. And texture, if you remember from the Frida Kahlo lesson, is when you can feel the photo with your eyes. Paul intentionally painted right onto that fabric so that the surface was not smooth, and it gave it some texture. And this is called Heroic Strokes of the Bow. This is what Paul envisioned when he was playing the violin. Notice that black line that's zigzagging from the top to the bottom of the paper, back and forth. That's what Paul pictured what it looked like when you play the violin. So I'm going to play a little bit of some violin for you, and you're welcome to play along with your air violin, and that might help you picture what Paul was seeing when he made this painting. Well, whether you play the violin yourself or you played the air violin along with me now, maybe you've seen someone play the violin, I hope that music was able to help you see what Paul was seeing, the stroking of the strings on the violin as you move back and forth, right? Back and forth. There's also some different shapes and lines all around that zigzag line. And that is what Paul thought the music looked like when he played the violin. Kind of looks like music notes, but I think Paul really made this his own. This is called the kettle drummer. Typically in an orchestra, drummers sit in the back. Paul noticed that when the drummers would go to play their instrument, they would first raise their arms in the air with their sticks in hand and then hit their drums to make that really loud noise. So let's listen to what some drummers sound like, and maybe that will help you see what Paul was seeing when he created this painting. Okay, so that was some drums being played there. And that is what Paul was seeing in his mind when he created this painting of the kettle drummer. Okay, so now that we've gotten to know the artist Paul Klee and seen some examples of abstract art, let's take another look at abstract art by creating our own paintings of abstract fish. Let's go over the supplies one more time. We will need a black crayon. You will also need some paint, temporary primary colors. That is yellow, red, blue, and white. I'm using tempera paint. This is water-based, easy to clean up. If you have any other paint at home, that will work fine too, especially watercolor paint. You'll also need a sheet of construction paper to paint on. I will be using this light blue construction paper. Remember, we are using this landscape and not portrait. So make sure you have it across the table, landscape or hot dog, light blue construction paper. Any color will work fine if you do not have light blue. We'll also need a paintbrush. Any size is fine. Paintbrush, a cup of water, and I'm using a jar. So if you want to use a jar or a bowl, that will work fine too. Make sure you have a paintbrush and water. We will be using lots of water in this lesson. You'll also need something to mix colors on. So I'll be using this plate here. You can use a plate from your kitchen, paper plate, styrofoam. You can also use 2 paper towels together or 2 sheets of paper together as well. And one more time, let's take a look at what we'll be creating today. And that is abstract fish. So we're going to create our own abstract fish. And I'll give you plenty of opportunities to make this painting your own. So let's go ahead and create our own paintings of abstract fish inspired by Paul Klee.
Make sure that you have your paper landscape. You'll need the construction paper and your black crayon. The black crayon is very important because it's going to help make sure that any details that you add to your painting will still show through even after you've painted over those lines. Black crayon actually repels paint. So let's go ahead and get started by first drawing our fish, and then we will paint. Go ahead and find the left side of your paper. Remember, your left hand makes an L, so we want to find the left side of your paper. So go ahead and touch the left side of the paper. When you found the left side, go ahead and cut your paper in half with your hand. Right down the middle. You want to find the middle of the left side of your paper. Right in the middle. When you found the middle, put your 3 fingers together just like that and measure 3 finger spaces from the left edge of the paper right in the middle. And we're going to make a black dot right there. So 3 finger spaces from the left edge of your paper. Right in the middle, we're going to make a black dot. That's so we know where to start our fish, right? The lines for our fish, just a black dot. On the left side of our paper, 3 finger spaces from the left edge. Now our next step is we're going to make a line starting from the black dot. That line is going to look kind of like a J or really wide U. So we'll start from the dot and we're going to go down, but we'll curve right back up to the top right corner of the paper. Starting from the black dot, curve a line going down towards the bottom of your paper without touching the bottom, and then turn it straight back up towards the top right corner of your paper. Next, we're going to make an upside down U or the shape of a rainbow. But let's first start by finding the left side of your paper. Once again, remember, left hand makes an L shape. We're going to touch the bottom left corner of the paper. Measure using your 3 fingers together from the bottom left corner and make a little line, just a really light line, so that we know where to start our next line. So we just want a little line to mark, very light, to mark on the left edge of the paper. So 3 finger spaces from the bottom. 3 finger spaces from the bottom left corner, make a little line. Next, we're going to make that upside down U. Starting from this line, we're going to go up through the black dot and then curve back down towards the bottom right corner of the paper. That is the shape of our fish's body. So remember, starting from this line we made in the bottom left corner, 3 finger spaces from the bottom, go up through the black dot, and then curve back down towards the bottom right corner of your paper. We're now going to make the head of the fish. What we're going to do is use your whole left hand or your whole hand to measure from the left edge of the paper. Whole hand. Make sure the edge of your hand is touching the edge of the left side of the paper. We're going to make a curved line or a backward C, starting from the top of the paper, going down through the fish to the bottom of the paper, using our hand to help us measure. So use your whole hand to measure from the left side of the paper, making a backward C or a curved line from the top of the paper to the bottom. Now that we have the head of our fish, go ahead and make a circle right inside the head. That's going to be our eye. Make sure you don't color that in right now. You might want to color that later with your painting. We're now going to add some fun details to the fish. We're going to cut our fish right down the middle, from the back of the head to the back of the body, making sure not to draw inside the head, but right down the middle of the body, from the back of the head to the very back of the body. So you can make any line that you'd like. Here's some examples of lines that you can use. We're going to cut the fish right down the middle using any of these lines, or you can make up your own. So we'll just go right down the body of the fish. So you can use any line that you'd like, or you can make up a line to cut your fish right in half, right in the middle of the body. When you're done with that, choose any shape that you would like to make a side fin on your fish. And that could be the top or the bottom of this line that we've made. So choose any shape to make a side fin on your fish. That side fin does not have to touch this line, but choose any shape you want to make a side fin on your fish. Now we're going to go to the back of our fish. So where the tail is, or the right side of the paper. I'm going to use any line that you'd like to add a fun design to the tail of your fish. So any line that you'd like, add that to the tail of your fish. You are welcome to use the same line that I'm using, or you can make up your own. We're going to add a fun line to the tail of your fish. You can choose one of these lines, or you can make up your own. So now we've added a fun little detail to the body of the fish and to the tail. Let's now add a couple more details to our fish's body. We're going to make a curved line on the top of the body and on the bottom, making sure not to draw through the body of the fish. So I'm going to use my whole hand to measure from the top right corner of the paper, my whole hand. I'm going to use my hand to know how far inside of the paper to make a curved line from the top of the paper to the top of the fish's body. Using my whole hand on the top right corner to make a curved line. So I kind of like a shape of a C from the top of the paper to the top of the fish's body. We will do the same thing on the bottom. Same thing, you use your whole hand to make a curved line on the bottom of the fish's body. So from the bottom of the fish's body to the bottom of the paper. And this is on the right side of the paper, using your whole hand to make that line. Now let's add some fun details to the fish. We're going to add a top fin and a bottom fin, making sure not to draw in these sections or the tails. So in this little middle section at the top and the middle section at the bottom. Once again, you can use any line or shape that you would like to add a top or bottom fin to your fish. So choose any shape that you would like. Shape or line to add on the top of the fish's body, in this middle section here. So you can add a top fin. We are going to do the same thing on the bottom of the body. So we're going to move to the bottom of the body now, this middle section, and use any shape or line to add a bottom fin to your fish. Using any line or shape that you would like. Now that we've added a top and bottom fin to our fish, we're going to move to the front of the fish's head, these two sections right in the front. Use any shapes or lines that you'd like. If you want to use different shapes, you can do that too. To the front of the fish, but choose only one of these two sections, only one. So choose one of these sections to add any fun shapes or lines to the front of the fish. Any shapes or lines that you'd like. If you want to add a detail inside the head, you can do that now as well. Making sure not to add too little details because we'll need to color that in later when we're painting. We'll now move to the back of the fish or the right side of the paper. Once again, choose any lines or shapes to add to only one of these two sections. Only one of these two sections. Add any fun lines or shapes that you'd like. And that is the drawing of our fish. Make sure you added something fun in one of these front sections and one of the tails, only one. Let's now get our paint ready. I highly recommend setting up your paper similar to what I have, and also set your paint up in a similar fashion. So make sure you have your water cup near your paper. We are going to use lots of water. You'll also want to make sure that you have your warm colors first, so yellow and red, and then your cool colors next, blue, and then last, white. Make sure you have your plate near your paper so that when you're done mixing the colors, you can transfer it straight to your paper. Remember, we will be using lots of water, so make sure you have your water handy. Go ahead and take the lids off of your paint if you have not done so already. We will be using lots of water. We'll first use the warm colors, so make sure that you do not use any colors until I tell you to. It's very important that we use the warm colors first and then move on to the cool colors. Let's first start with yellow. So I'll dip my brush in the yellow paint. Before I touch the paper, I'm going to dip my brush into the container with water, making sure not to mix it around. You only want to get the paintbrush wet. Choose 2 or 3 sections to paint yellow. Only 2 or 3 sections to paint yellow. We have a few more colors that we are going to go through. So we want to make sure we don't fill up the whole paper with the yellow paint. Using water, that will help us get different shades of each color. That will also help us to clean our paintbrush naturally. You can also make sure to grab more water on your paintbrush, making sure not to clean off the paint before you go back to your paper to pick another section to paint yellow. So the water is kind of going to help us move the paint around, similar to when you use watercolor paint. So make sure you're still only using the yellow. You should not be using red or blue right now. Choosing 2 to 3 sections to paint yellow. And the tempera paint is water-based. So if you do get it on your table or your clothes, it does clean off very easily. So make sure we're using very little paint and lots of water. That water will help you move your paint around. It will also help give you different shades of each color. And it will help you naturally clean off your paintbrush right onto the paper so that we don't have to clean your paintbrush in between each color. If you do need to clean your paintbrush, make sure you do not use the water cup and that you use a paper towel instead. Your water cup should stay clean. Now we're done with the yellow. Let's move on to red. I'm going to dip my paintbrush into the red paint. But then before I touch the paper, I'll dip my brush into the water, making sure not to clean off the red paint. And then choose 2 or 3 sections to paint red. The white paint is optional, and I won't be using it because I will use the water instead to help me get different shades of each color. But you are always welcome to mix the white paint with any colors to make it lighter on your paper plate, whatever you're using to mix the colors onto. I'm running out of paint, so I will go get a little bit more and then go back into the water before I continue painting this section red. So we should be done with yellow, moving on to red, choosing only 2 or 3 sections to paint red. If you want to make pink, you can always mix red and white on your mixing plate, or you can use more water and that will help you to lighten the red paint. So you have some options. But remember, using more water will give you different shades of each color or the values of each color. So we should only be painting 2 or 3 sections red. Making sure that your paintbrush is free of paint before you get more paint, because you can always use the water to help you spread the paint around. Okay, so one more section I'm going to choose to paint red. We should be only using red right now, making sure not to use any more yellow or the blue. We are all done with yellow by itself. Remember, it's okay to paint over the black crown. Remember, that will show through once the paint dries. because crayon repels the paint. And you can choose any 2 sections that you'd like to paint red. And before I get more paint, there's lots of paint on the paper and on my brush. So I'll just use the water to help me spread the paint around. All right. So now we will move on to our next color, which is orange. To make orange, we will mix 2 colors on our plate, and that's going to be yellow and red. So you should be getting yellow and red paint, mixing that on your plate. If you want a brighter orange or lighter, you can use more yellow. And if you want it to be darker, you can use more red. Remember, you can always use some white paint, or you can always add just more water when you're painting to lighten the color as well. So lots of options. So you should be mixing yellow and red on your plate to make orange. Yellow and red. And once you like the shade of orange, you might have to practice going back and forth between using yellow and red paint and seeing if you want more yellow or more red to get the shade of orange that you want. Once you have your orange, make sure to dip your brush into the water. We don't want to clean the brush off, just want to get it wet. And choose 2 or 3 sections, any you'd like, to paint orange. Any 2 or 3 sections you'd like to paint orange. There's lots of paint on my brush, so I'm going to just go into the water and use the water to help me spread the paint around. And if you're just now catching up after using the red, remember I mixed yellow and red on the plate to make orange. So you should be moving on to orange after you're done with red. And choose one other place to paint orange. Remember, we're choosing only 2 or 3 areas for each color. So make sure you're not using blue. You should only be using orange right now. No more red or yellow by themselves. We're all done with red and yellow by themselves. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next color, and that is going to be blue. So blue all by itself. I'm going to go straight into the blue paint, dip the brush into the water, and choose a couple of sections to paint blue. Remember, if you need to clean your brush, you can always use a paper towel. Make sure that you are not using your water cup because it should still be pretty clean. We're only using it to wet the bristles. We don't want to wash our paintbrush off. Choose 2 or 3 sections, any that you'd like, to paint blue. And we have 2 more colors after this. We are almost done with our painting. Remember, you can always mix white with any of the colors that we're using to make them a little lighter, or you can just try to use more water and less paint. You should be using a little bit of paint and lots of water. So we're using blue right now, choosing 2 or 3 sections to paint blue. Any 2 or 3 sections that you'd like. And it's also okay if you want to leave some of the construction paper showing through, especially if you're using the light blue construction paper. That's okay if you want to leave some of that showing through. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our last 2 colors. After we're done with the blue by itself, the next color we're going to make is green. So we're going to choose another section on our plate to get a little bit of yellow paint. Put that on the plate. Grab some blue paint. Start mixing those 2 colors on your plate to make green. Remember, if you want a brighter green, use the lighter color, so more yellow. And if you want it to be darker, use more blue. So we're mixing yellow and blue to make green. You can always add in some white if you want to lighten the colors a little. That's okay too. Using yellow and blue to make green. You should be mixing on your plate, not on your painting. And then mix these colors to make green. Make sure you're getting the shade of green that you'd like. I want mine lighter, so I'm going to use lots of yellow. So white is the optional color. You do not have to use white at any time if you don't want to. I like that shade of green. I think I'm going to stick with it. Now that I have lots of paint on my brush, I'm going to dip my brush into the water and choose 2 sections, 2 or 3, to paint green. Any 2 or 3 that you'd like. We have 1 more color after this. So we're done with the blue and by itself. We're also done with the red and yellow. You should be using green. Remember, I used yellow and blue to make the green. Choosing 2 or 3 sections to paint green. And make sure you're using a little bit of paint and lots of water. We want to get all the shades of each color that we're using. So before you think to go and get more paint, try using some water to move the color around. There's lots of paint on the paper, I've noticed. Okay. So when you're done with green, we'll move on to our final color, and that is purple. So choose another section of your plate to make purple. We're going to use red and blue. So start mixing red and blue on your plate when you're done with green. to make purple. Remember, if you want a darker purple, use more blue. And if you want a lighter purple, use more red, or you can always add in some white. So you have options, but we can always use lots of water as well. Ooh, I like the shade of my purple. This is a good purple this time. Use a little more blue because I want it to be really dark, like a grape. Ooh, it's kind of looking like a blueberry now. I like it. Okay. So I like the shade of my purple, and I think I'm going to keep using that. So let me get that mixed in really good. Just a little more blue in there. Make sure you're mixing on your plate and not on your paper. Now that I have the shade that I want, get some water, choose a couple of sections to paint purple. Remember, it's okay if you paint over any designs that you made, and that will show through once the painting dries, so it's okay. And at any time, if you want to use the white paint, you can always use that to lighten any colors that you'd like. So choose 2 or 3 sections to paint purple. Make sure you don't cover up the whole paper. You don't have to. If you want to, that you are more than welcome. This is your painting. But it's okay to leave some of the light blue construction paper showing through. That will add to the painting. And that's one less color that we have to make. All right. So that is the end of our painting. Make sure that you let your painting dry before you pick it up. The paper is going to be really wet, so the paint might run if you pick it up before it's completely dry. Make sure you sign your name on the front or back of your painting. Thank you so much for joining me today.